The palace stood still. That was the feeling that rippled across not only Britain but the entire world just moments ago, when a stunning revelation thundered through headlines. King Charles has stepped aside, and Prince William has officially ascended the throne. News alerts blazed across television screens, phones buzzed in hands, and social media feeds erupted with disbelief, confusion, and speculation. In the blink of an eye, history shifted, and an institution older than memory itself was shaken to its very core. People had expected Charles to reign, perhaps for decades to come, following his mother's towering legacy. But instead the nation woke up to a new king, one younger, steadier, and bearing the weight of both admiration and expectation. The question now is not whether this moment is historic, but how we got here, and what it truly means. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine being a citizen walking past Buckingham Palace this morning, expecting only to see tourists crowding around the gilded gates. Instead, whispers ripple through the crowd, whispers that turn into gasps as journalists rush to confirm the truth. People clutch newspapers that had gone to print only hours before with a very different headline. But now, those pages feel like relics of a bygone era. How could this have happened in what seemed like the blink of an eye? Did Charles truly quit of his own volition, or was he gently, or perhaps forcefully, pushed toward a decision that would alter the crown forever? The official statement uses careful words, polished and measured, yet between the lines lies the scent of urgency and quiet desperation. When kings quit, it is never simple. It is never ordinary. It is a clash of tradition, power, and survival. The middle of this story plunges deeper into the heart of the matter. For months, even years, murmurs of strain surrounded King Charles. The weight of the monarchy is no gentle burden. It presses, it grinds, it demands every fiber of strength from the man or woman who wears the crown. Charles knew this more than anyone, having spent the majority of his life waiting, watching, preparing for his mother's eventual passing. When that moment finally came, it was supposed to be his time. He was expected to embody stability, to carry forth the Windsor legacy, to assure a world that the monarchy could still stand firm in an era of relentless change. And yet, cracks had begun to show. Whether through health rumors whispered in corners or political pressures mounting quietly behind palace walls, Charles seemed to wrestle with a role that had arrived not as a gift, but as a curse delivered too late. On the other side of that struggle, a younger figure waited. Prince William, long admired as a symbol of modern royalty, stood with his wife Catherine, the future queen consort, at his side. William had grown up under the glare of cameras, his every step analyzed and compared to his father's or his late mother's. For decades, he had been cast as the bridge between old and new, tradition and progress, duty and humanity. With every public appearance, he carried an air of quiet inevitability, as if destiny itself had chosen him as the one to bring the monarchy into a new age. Now, with Charles's sudden abdication, that destiny has crystallized faster than anyone could have imagined. The very corridors of power, draped in crimson carpets and guarded by centuries of ritual, now echo with William's footsteps. The whispers around the palace say it was only a matter of time. The shock lies not in the change itself, but in how abruptly it arrived. As this introduction winds toward its end, we must pause and take in the enormity of what has just unfolded. A monarchy that prides itself on endurance, on outlasting wars, crises, and revolutions, has been rocked by a decision made not in the glow of triumph, but in the shadow of exhaustion. King Charles, a man who spent his life waiting, has surrendered the throne only a short time into his reign. And in his place, a son who never asked for power this soon now shoulders the weight of a kingdom and a commonwealth. This moment is more than news. It is history unfolding in real time. It forces us to ask questions that echo through both the heart and the mind. What does it mean for Britain's future? Can William live up to expectations that are nothing short of monumental? And perhaps most haunting of all, what drove Charles to walk away after waiting so long to wear the crown? The beginning has gripped us with the shock, the middle has laid bare the tension behind the throne, and the end of this introduction leaves us at the edge of anticipation. What comes next is a journey through the unseen halls of power, through family dynamics, political intrigue, and the deeply human story of a father relinquishing and a son rising. The cameras may capture the coronation smile, the cheers of crowds, and the ringing of church bells, but beneath it all lies a storm of motives, fears, and possibilities yet to be uncovered. Stay with this story, because what we have witnessed is not just a transfer of power, it is a seismic shift in the very soul of the monarchy, one that will leave a mark for generations to come. The announcement that shook the world did not come with pomp or ceremony. It came as a press release, terse and carefully written, dropped into the hands of journalists who scrambled to make sense of it before the words even settled in their minds. Buckingham Palace, the symbolic heart of monarchy, confirmed in plain terms that King Charles had abdicated. It was not merely a rumor, nor a trial balloon floating through tabloids. It was official. The king, the man who had waited longer than any heir in British history to ascend the throne, was relinquishing the crown to his son. The moment the news broke, the world stopped in its tracks. Cars pulled over as radios cut through morning chatter with a breaking alert. News anchors froze mid-sentence. People staring at their phones rubbed their eyes in disbelief. In a matter of minutes, the United Kingdom had a new monarch, and the entire globe bore witness to history rewritten in real time. The scene outside Buckingham Palace grew electric almost instantly. Tourists, who had been taking pictures of guards in red tunics and tall bearskin hats, suddenly found themselves part of a living tableau of history. Murmurs turned into gasps as strangers pressed against the gates, asking each other the same urgent questions. Why now? What pushed him to this decision? Was this truly voluntary, or was there pressure from forces within the palace? Reporters clutched their microphones tightly, their voices quivering with the weight of the moment as they tried to relay the shock back to their studios. Even those accustomed to the unpredictable rhythms of royal life knew that nothing like this had happened since Edward VIII renounced his throne nearly a century ago. The monarchy thrives on continuity, on the illusion that it is unshakable. But today, that illusion fractured, and everyone could feel it. Within minutes, camera crews flooded the streets of London. Helicopters buzzed overhead to capture images of the palace, where curtains flickered in upper windows as if to hint at the storm unfolding inside. Commentators filled airtime with speculation, scrambling to stitch together a narrative from fragments of fact. Some spoke of the king's health, whispering about ailments long hidden from the public eye. Others murmured about political pressure, about advisors weary of his cautious reign. Whatever the truth, one fact dominated. The crown had shifted, not by death, but by choice. That distinction made the moment even heavier. Monarchs are not supposed to quit. They are bound by duty until their last breath. But here was Charles, stepping down, leaving behind a throne he had only just inherited. As the hours passed, the shock rippled outward. In cafes across Britain, the sound of spoons clinking against porcelain was drowned out by incredulous chatter. Office workers abandoned tasks to huddle around televisions, their faces lit up by the bright red banners of breaking news bulletins. In Parliament, ministers were seen rushing between chambers, clutching folders, whispering urgently to one another about the constitutional implications. Even seasoned political figures admitted they were caught off guard. The abdication of a reigning monarch does not happen in silence. It shakes the foundations of government, law, and identity. Every line of the palace's statement was scrutinized, every phrase dissected for clues. Did the king cite personal reasons, or was the wording deliberately vague? The more people read, the less they felt they understood. And that uncertainty added to the fever of speculation. The world beyond Britain reacted with equal astonishment. Across the Commonwealth, from Canada to Australia, leaders issued cautious statements, their words tinged with disbelief. Some pledged loyalty to the new king immediately, others waited for clarification before committing. In Washington, journalists hounded White House officials for comment, while in Europe, newspapers rushed out special editions carrying dramatic front-page headlines. The Pope, it was said, had been briefed within minutes. Monarchs in other nations reached out privately, expressing both sympathy and curiosity. For all the pageantry that usually surrounds the monarchy, this moment was stripped of grandeur. It was raw, sudden, and almost unsettlingly human. The idea of a man who had dreamed of this role his entire life suddenly surrendering It was a story that resonated across cultures, beyond Britain itself. But perhaps the most powerful images came from ordinary people. In pubs, hushed silence fell as televisions blared the news. Patrons stared, mouths half open, as broadcasters replayed the statement again and again, each time with added urgency. In homes across the country, grandparents explained to bewildered children that the king had stepped down, trying themselves to grasp what that truly meant. Some cried, others laughed nervously, and some shook their heads in anger. After waiting all that time, and now this, one man muttered to a reporter outside a London Underground station. For those who had watched Charles grow old waiting for the crown, the sense of irony was almost too much to bear. And yet, beneath the swirl of emotions lay a shared recognition. This was not just another royal headline. This was history with a capital H. Inside the palace, the mood was said to be heavy with tension. Staff who had served multiple monarchs described the atmosphere as surreal, even eerie. Courtiers who usually maintained stiff upper lips struggled to hide their unease as they moved through the gilded halls. Charles himself was not seen in public. His absence only fueled speculation, leaving William to bear the immediate weight of public expectation. The cameras turned to him, capturing his first movements as heir turned king. Every word, every gesture mattered now, not only for himself, but for the institution he represented. It was William who would step forward to reassure the nation, to offer the continuity that Charles had abruptly cut short. For the public, the sight of him carried both relief and trepidation. Relief, because he was admired, seen as a steady hand and a modern figure. Trepidation, because the pace of this transition left no time to prepare. The country had skipped a beat in history, and people were still trying to catch their breath. The announcement that shook the world was not just about Charles quitting. It was about the symbolism of monarchy itself, suddenly revealing its fragility. For centuries, the crown had weathered storms of scandal, politics, and rebellion. It had endured because it seemed unyielding, above the chaos of ordinary life. But here was a king voluntarily stepping down, not felled by fate, but by choice. That act stripped the monarchy of some of its mythic aura and reminded the world that even kings are men, flawed, tired, and sometimes overwhelmed. It forced a reckoning not just within Britain, but across the globe. What is the monarchy's true strength? Is it tradition, or is it the people who wear the crown? And if even a king can say enough is enough, what does that mean for the institution's future? By the time the first day of coverage came to an end, the world had not moved on. Instead, it had sunk deeper into the story, hungry for answers. What had Charles said in private to his son? What had Catherine whispered to William as they prepared for the cameras? Was this decision born out of love for his country or fear of failure? These questions burned in the air, unanswered but impossible to ignore. The announcement did not just shake the world for a moment. It ignited a firestorm of curiosity and doubt that would not be extinguished easily. And as the dust settled, one thing was clear. History had turned a corner, and nothing would be the same again. For months leading up to this moment, whispers about King Charles's struggles circulated quietly, dismissed by some as gossip, yet persistently surfacing in the press and among royal insiders. To the public, Charles was the man who had waited a lifetime for the throne, an heir whose destiny seemed endlessly delayed. When he finally became king after the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, many believed he would dedicate himself fully to the role, fulfilling both his own ambition and the expectations of his people. But beneath the surface, there were cracks. His reign, brief as it has been marked not by triumph but by unease, and those who watched closely could see the signs of strain. His struggles, both personal and institutional, cast long shadows over the monarchy, and it was only a matter of time before they forced a reckoning. The first of these struggles was health. While the palace often insists on privacy regarding the medical details of its members, Charles's appearance told its own story. Observers noted his tired expressions, the slowing of his movements, and the unspoken toll of age pressing down on him. A monarch is supposed to project vigor and permanence, but the king appeared at times as though the crown weighed heavier on his body than it ever had on his soul. Unconfirmed reports of hospital visits, specialist consultations, and ongoing treatments trickled into the media. The silence from the palace did little to dispel the concern, it only amplified it. For a monarch expected to embody stability, these signs hinted at fragility, and fragility is something the crown cannot afford to show. Then came the pressures of public expectation. King Charles inherited a monarchy that was already bruised. The scandals surrounding Prince Andrew had tarnished its reputation. The departure of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle to America had fractured the family narrative, exposing rifts to the entire world. Charles was thrust into a role not only as a ruler, but as a repairman for an institution fraying at its edges. The people wanted reassurance. They wanted a monarch who could unite them, and they wanted it fast. Yet Charles's nature, thoughtful, deliberate, cautious, meant he was slow to act where the public demanded quick decisions. His speeches, often dense and measured, failed to ignite the kind of emotional connection that his mother so effortlessly maintained. Instead of appearing as the steady hand guiding Britain forward, Charles seemed to falter, caught between tradition and modernity, never fully grasping either. Political pressures added to the storm. Though the monarchy is supposed to remain above politics, its influence is undeniable, and Charles had always harbored opinions on issues ranging from the environment to architecture. As king, he was expected to silence his voice, to stand as a neutral figurehead. But whispers persisted that he struggled with this restraint. His advisors reportedly worried about his tendency to speak out, even in private. Meanwhile, government officials, already navigating turbulent waters of economic uncertainty and shifting global alliances, quietly pressed for a monarch who would not complicate matters. The palace became a battleground of subtle suggestions, with advisors pushing him toward retreat while others urged him to assert himself. It was a no-win situation, and Charles often looked like a man trapped within his own role. Perhaps the deepest struggle, though, was psychological. Charles's life had been defined by waiting, decades of waiting. When the throne finally came, he was no longer the energetic young prince with bold ideas, but a man in his 70s, carrying both the aches of age and the scars of a lifetime in the public eye. The dream had become a burden. Those close to him say that he often reflected on the irony of it all. He had waited too long, and by the time the crown was his, he lacked the energy to carry it as he had once imagined. The role was not just a duty, it was a weight, dragging him down day after day. Behind closed doors, Charles reportedly confided that he felt he had become a caretaker monarch, a bridge between the great legacy of his mother and the long reign of his son. If that was truly how he saw himself, then perhaps stepping down was always an inevitability, an act of surrender to both reality and history. The cracks in Charles's reign were not only personal, but also symbolic. Public opinion polls hinted at growing dissatisfaction. While respect for him as a man existed, enthusiasm for him as king was muted at best. Many Britons openly declared that they would prefer William on the throne, seeing him as a figure of youth, relatability, and stability. That knowledge could not have escaped Charles. To reign while knowing the majority longed for your successor is a unique torment, and one that surely gnawed at him during sleepless nights. Every time William and Catherine appeared in public to rapturous applause, Charles must have felt the contrast. Every photograph of their young family smiling on the palace balcony was a reminder of what the people wanted, and it wasn't him. The media, too, played its part in amplifying his struggles. Coverage of Charles was rarely flattering, often framing him as out of touch or burdened by controversy. Old scandals, long buried, resurfaced in tabloids. His marriage to Camilla, once the subject of fierce debate, remained a sore point for some. The ghost of Diana hovered over him, her legacy woven into every comparison between him and his son. Where William was praised as the heir shaped by Diana's compassion, Charles was cast as the man who had hurt her, a narrative that clung to him even as he tried to redefine his reign. No matter how many charitable causes he championed, no matter how many speeches he gave, the shadows of the past lingered, and they weighed heavily on his crown. Financial and institutional pressures compounded the burden. The monarchy is costly, and in times of economic hardship, questions about its value grew louder. Charles faced criticism for maintaining estates and lifestyles that seemed extravagant to ordinary Britons struggling with rising costs. Calls for transparency in royal finances rang louder than ever. Though he attempted to modernize aspects of the monarchy, the changes were too incremental to satisfy critics. Instead of being hailed as a reformer, he was accused of clinging to privilege. Every expenditure was scrutinized, every decision second-guessed. Even within the monarchy's own ranks, there were whispers that William's streamlined, modern vision would better suit the times. The struggles of King Charles, taken together, paint the picture not of a man weak in spirit, but of a monarch overwhelmed by forces greater than himself. His health, his age, the weight of expectation, the ghosts of his past, the demands of his present, all converged to form a crown too heavy to bear. In public, he smiled, waved, and played the part of king. In private, he must have wrestled with the knowledge that his reign was not what the nation needed. And so, when the moment came, he chose to step aside, to allow his son to carry the crown into the future. It was not an act of cowardice, but perhaps of clarity, a recognition that his struggles had reached their peak, and that the monarchy could not endure them forever. For the people of Britain, the realization that their king had been struggling all along adds a layer of poignancy to his abdication. It transforms the story from one of mere resignation to one of humanity. It reminds the world that even kings are men, subject to the same doubts, fears, and limitations as anyone else. Charles's struggles did not make him less of a monarch. They made him real, tangible, almost relatable. Yet they also paved the way for an unavoidable truth. His reign was never meant to last. It was a brief chapter in the long saga of the British monarchy, a chapter defined not by strength, but by surrender. Behind the palace doors, the story unfolded in ways the public could only imagine. The gilded halls of Buckingham Palace, the hushed chambers of Clarence House, and the private study of Windsor Castle all became stages for secret discussions that would eventually lead to the most dramatic royal abdication in modern history. The public saw only the headlines, the brief statement from the palace, and the photographs of William stepping into his new role. But behind the closed doors of the monarchy, conversations had been simmering for months, perhaps even years, and the suddenness of the announcement belied the careful, tense, and often painful process that paved the way for it. It began with whispers among advisors, those seasoned courtiers who had weathered the reign of Queen Elizabeth and knew the signs of strain when they saw them. The king's schedule was trimmed quietly, official appearances shortened or delegated. Meetings that should have been routine were postponed. Those in the inner circle noticed Charles's hesitation, the way his shoulders slumped slightly after long days, and the moments when his words betrayed more fatigue than he intended. At first, they chalked it up to age or the natural weight of transition. But as weeks turned into months, it became impossible to ignore. Behind the grandeur of state banquets and ceremonies, there was a man struggling to meet the demands of his role, and advisors, tasked with preserving the monarchy at all costs, began asking a dangerous question: should the king step aside? The suggestion was not voiced openly at first. Courtiers are trained to guard the dignity of the crown, and to even hint at abdication was taboo. Yet the conversations took place nonetheless, whispered in corridors, carried in coded notes, disguised as discussions about long-term planning. Gradually, the whispers reached the ears of senior royals. William, who had always respected his father's place, resisted the idea initially. He knew the crown was both an honor and a burden, and he was not eager to see his father humiliated by suggestions of incapacity. Catherine, however, was more pragmatic. Those close to her say she recognized that Charles's reign was increasingly untenable, and she counseled William privately to prepare for the possibility that the torch would pass sooner than anyone expected. The strain began to show in family gatherings, where what should have been private dinners often turned into unspoken tests of loyalty and veiled glances exchanged across tables. The queen consort, Camilla, was another figure caught in the storm. To her, Charles's abdication was not only a political matter, but a deeply personal one. She had stood by his side through decades of scrutiny, and the crown represented a vindication of their shared journey. For him to relinquish it now was both heartbreaking and humiliating. Those close to her report that she argued fiercely against the idea, insisting that Charles could endure, that he owed it to himself to hold the throne he had waited so long to wear. Her voice, though strong, was one among many, and the tide was against her. Palace aides whispered that Camilla's resistance only deepened Charles's torment, torn as he was between his wife's loyalty and the undeniable reality of his own limitations. As the internal debate intensified, the government was quietly drawn into the fold. The prime minister was summoned to discreet audiences, where the king's condition and capacity were delicately broached. Legal experts were consulted, drafting scenarios and contingencies for what would happen if the king chose to abdicate. These documents were not intended for the public eye, but their very existence spoke volumes about the seriousness of the situation. In hushed tones, within wood-paneled rooms, decisions of immense consequence were weighed, debated, and agonized over. Every step carried risk. A monarch stepping down voluntarily could destabilize confidence in the institution, but a monarch staying on while visibly faltering could do even greater damage. Eventually, the decision landed where it always must, with Charles himself. Accounts from palace insiders suggest that the moment of reckoning came during a private meeting between father and son. William, long seen as the reluctant heir, was said to have looked his father in the eye and expressed both love and resolve. He did not demand the crown, but he did not deny the truth either. The monarchy's survival required strength, and the country needed it now. Charles, weary and perhaps relieved to hear the words spoken aloud, reportedly sat in silence for what felt like an eternity before nodding. It was not the triumphant moment he had dreamed of as a younger man. It was a quiet surrender, tinged with sorrow and resignation. In that instant, the future was set in motion. The days that followed were a flurry of activity, hidden from public view. Lawyers finalized the paperwork, crafting the legal framework that would allow the abdication to proceed smoothly. Clergy were consulted about the religious implications, ensuring that the transition could be framed as both dignified and in keeping with tradition. Palace staff were sworn to secrecy, their lips sealed even as they prepared for an event that would soon explode onto the world stage. Security protocols were updated, ensuring that William and his family were fully protected as the transfer of power loomed. Meanwhile, Charles retreated into solitude, preparing his statement, rehearsing his words, and coming to terms with the reality that he would no longer be king. The atmosphere within the palace was described by insiders as both tense and surreal. Longtime staff members, who had served multiple monarchs, walked the halls with heavy hearts, aware they were living through a moment that would be dissected by historians for centuries. Some described hearing muffled arguments behind closed doors, voices raised then quickly hushed. Others noted the quiet tears of those who had devoted their careers to Charles, who now felt a mix of sorrow and betrayal. Every corner of the palace seemed charged with emotion, as though the walls themselves knew that history was being reshaped within their confines. On the morning of the announcement, the inner circle gathered one last time. Charles sat at the head of the table, his statement before him. The room was silent as he read the words aloud, his voice steady but his eyes betraying the weight of the moment. William and Catherine sat nearby, solemn and composed, ready to step into their new roles. Camilla sat slightly apart, her expression unreadable, though those who watched closely swore they saw her eyes glisten with unshed tears. When Charles finished reading, the room remained silent for several seconds before anyone spoke. It was William who finally broke the silence, offering his father a quiet nod. No grand speeches were made, no dramatic gestures, only the acknowledgement of a decision that would reverberate through history. Behind the palace doors, this was not a story of triumph, but of compromise, not of glory, but of survival. The monarchy had chosen continuity over tradition, pragmatism over pride. Charles had chosen to yield the crown for the sake of the institution, even as it broke his heart. William had accepted it, not out of ambition but out of duty, and the advisors, courtiers, and government officials who had orchestrated the transition had done so with the cold precision of people who understood that history sometimes requires sacrifice. The world outside saw the headlines, the photographs, and the carefully crafted statements. But the real story was written in whispers, glances, and private conversations that will never be recorded in official documents. Prince William's first words as king carried the weight of centuries. It is one thing to be heir apparent, standing always in the shadow of your parent, and another entirely to suddenly feel the crown shift onto your head while the ink on your father's abdication statement is still wet. The cameras caught him as he walked out of the palace, Catherine at his side, his expression calm but solemn, a man visibly aware that history was upon him. The press hushed the moment he stepped to the podium. Photographers lowered their voices, news anchors leaned in, and millions around the world waited for the sound of his first words. This was the moment everyone would remember, the first address of King William. He began slowly, with a deep breath, his voice carrying the familiar blend of formality and warmth that Britons had come to expect from him over the years. He spoke first of his father. He acknowledged King Charles not only as the monarch who had served briefly, but as a man who had devoted his life to duty, to causes, and to his people. His words were measured, respectful, and heavy with emotion. He made it clear that his father's decision to step aside had not been one of weakness, but of extraordinary honesty, a recognition of limits and a devotion to the future of the monarchy. In that moment, William managed to honor his father's reign while preparing the nation to accept his own. The audience listened in silence, some moved to tears, others nodding with solemn approval. But as the speech unfolded, William's tone shifted from homage to determination. He spoke not only as a son, but as a king. He pledged himself to serve with humility and resolve, to unite the nation in times of uncertainty, and to carry forward the traditions of the crown while adapting to the challenges of the modern age. His words were not lofty rhetoric alone. They carried a sense of practicality, the voice of a man aware of the skepticism that lingered around the monarchy. He addressed the public directly, promising transparency, accountability, and an earnest effort to bridge the gap between the institution and the people it represents. It was not the language of a distant monarch, but of a man who understood the moment demanded sincerity. The emotional weight of the occasion was heightened by Catherine's presence. Standing beside him, she embodied grace and quiet strength, her expression one of unwavering support. She did not speak, but her silence spoke volumes. For years, the public had adored her, seeing in her both dignity and approachability. In William's first moments as king, she appeared not merely as consort, but as an anchor, a reminder that his reign would not be carried alone. Together, they projected unity, a partnership that contrasted sharply with the fractured image of the monarchy in recent years. Their appearance as a pair symbolized continuity and stability, qualities the public craved in the wake of Charles's abrupt departure. As William continued, his words touched on the broader role of the monarchy in the world. He spoke of the Commonwealth, affirming the importance of bonds between nations that stretched across continents. He mentioned the challenges of climate change, inequality, and global unrest, framing them as issues that demanded leadership not just from governments, but from institutions that inspire. While careful not to overstep into politics, he nodded toward the causes his father had championed, signaling that while his reign would be different, it would not abandon the legacies of those who came before him. It was a balancing act, tradition and progress, reverence and renewal, and William seemed acutely aware that the eyes of the world were measuring every syllable. The impact of his first words was immediate. Across Britain, televisions and radios replayed clips of the speech on a constant loop. Analysts praised the steadiness of his tone, the clarity of his message, and the confidence with which he carried himself. Ordinary people, interviewed in the streets, expressed a mixture of relief and optimism. Many said they felt comforted by his composure, that he looked and sounded like the king the nation needed. Others, still grappling with the shock of Charles's abdication, admitted that William's words softened the blow, offering a sense of direction in a moment of upheaval. Social media erupted with commentary, hashtags declaring him the people's king, trending within minutes. Even critics of the monarchy admitted grudging respect for the way he handled his first test. Yet beneath the praise, there lingered an undercurrent of pressure. Those who listened closely to William's speech could hear the enormity of what lay ahead. It is one thing to deliver reassuring words in a single moment, but another to live up to them in the years that follow. His promises of transparency, modernization, and service would be tested, scrutinized, and at times, weaponized against him. Every decision he made, every gesture he offered, would be judged against the high bar he set with his first address. The public may have been reassured, but they were also expectant, and expectations can be as heavy as the crown itself. After the speech, William withdrew with Catherine and their children, the images of their family broadcast across the world. The sight of George, Charlotte, and Louis standing nearby reminded viewers that this was not only the start of William's reign, but the continuation of a dynasty. It was a glimpse of the future, a promise that the monarchy would endure through the next generation. For many, it was a comforting sight, proof that the transition was not an end but a new beginning. For others, it raised questions about the burdens being placed upon children too young to fully understand the roles history was shaping for them. In private, William's first words as king were likely followed by conversations of greater weight. Advisors would have gathered to discuss the immediate steps of his reign, from ceremonial arrangements to constitutional obligations. Meetings with the prime minister and senior officials would follow, ensuring that the machinery of state continued without disruption. In those private rooms, beyond the cameras and microphones, William would face the realities of kingship. Decisions about governance, about family, about the future of the monarchy itself. His speech had reassured the public, but now the true work began. The legacy of a first address is powerful. For Queen Elizabeth, it had been her wartime broadcasts as a young princess that defined her early role. For Charles, his words upon ascending the throne had been seen as cautious, weighted by decades of expectation. For William, his first words as king struck a different chord, one of steadiness, sincerity, and resolve. They were the words of a man aware that he had been thrust into this role sooner than expected, yet determined to rise to the occasion. They reassured, they inspired, and they set the tone for what his reign might become. In the days that followed, the echoes of William's words continued to resonate. Newspapers carried editorials praising his composure, even those skeptical of the monarchy acknowledging the significance of his address. Historians began writing essays comparing his words to those of monarchs past. Citizens replayed clips, sharing them with comments about feeling proud to be British again. The speech became not just a moment in time, but a marker of transition, a reminder that history is not only made in battles or treaties, but in words spoken at just the right moment. And yet, for William himself, the meaning of those words was more personal. They were not merely crafted lines on a page, but a vow spoken aloud, binding him to the people he now served. They were the first step in a journey that would test his character, his resilience, and his vision. His first words as king were powerful, but their true legacy would be determined by whether he could live up to them, day after day, year after year, as the weight of the crown pressed ever heavier upon him. Catherine's transition into the role of queen consort was not merely ceremonial. It marked a profound turning point in the story of the monarchy, one that blended history, symbolism, and human emotion into a moment the world could not ignore. As Prince William stepped into kingship, Catherine stood beside him not just as his wife, but as a partner in leadership, instantly elevated to one of the most scrutinized and revered positions in the world. Her new title came with centuries of tradition, expectation, and weight, but it also carried with it the hope of renewal for a monarchy struggling to stay relevant in the modern age. From the moment she appeared before the cameras as queen consort, the conversation shifted, not only about William's reign, but about what Catherine's presence meant for the future of the crown. For years, Catherine had been adored by the public. From the time of her marriage into the royal family, she was seen as composed, graceful, and grounded. Unlike many figures thrust into royal life, she seemed to carry herself with ease, balancing her roles as mother, public servant, and future queen. With her poised demeanor and deep sense of duty, she became a figure of stability in a family often marked by turbulence. Now, as queen consort, those qualities took on new significance. Her grace was no longer a matter of admiration but of necessity. Her steadiness became essential to the survival of the monarchy in the wake of Charles's abdication. Every smile, every word, every gesture she made was instantly interpreted as a sign of what the new era of kingship would look like. In contrast, criticism came swiftly and vehemently from multiple quarters. Many viewed the confession as a calculated attempt to garner public attention, interpretive of what some described as a media spectacle designed for shock value. Critics questioned Harry's motives, suggesting that by airing such intimate family matters on live television, he risked damaging the monarchy, public trust, and the very institution he had sworn to serve. Some commentators drew parallels to prior incidents, framing this revelation as part of a pattern in which private matters were weaponized for public consumption. Social media threads were filled with debates over whether Harry's actions were justified or reckless, with discussions often escalating into heated arguments between supporters and detractors. The reaction was further intensified by the polarizing nature of Meghan Markle's presence in public discourse. For decades, her influence on Harry had been a source of fascination and speculation. The confession reignited debates over her intentions, behavior, and role in the alleged deceptions regarding Archie and Lilibet. Memes and viral content emerged almost instantly, blending humor, satire, and criticism. Some depicted Harry as overwhelmed and betrayed. Others cast Meghan in caricatured scenarios implying manipulation or secrecy. The use of humor served multiple purposes. For some, it was a coping mechanism to deal with shocking revelations. For others, it functioned as social commentary, distilling complex familial and societal dynamics into accessible visual narratives. Social media algorithms played an unintentional but pivotal role in amplifying the reactions. Content that elicited strong emotional responses, whether laughter, shock, outrage, or empathy, was shared rapidly, reaching millions within hours. The virality of memes, videos, and posts created a feedback loop. As public engagement increased, the platforms promoted content more aggressively, resulting in an ever-expanding reach. This amplification had significant consequences for public perception, as narratives were often simplified, exaggerated, or distorted for entertainment value, further influencing global conversations about the royal family. Traditional media also responded with urgency. Newspapers, television networks, and online news portals scrambled to cover the story, each with its unique editorial angle. Some focused on the emotional dimension, examining Harry's personal struggles and the toll of secrecy and betrayal. Others analyzed the implications for the monarchy, assessing potential institutional damage, political repercussions, and the effect on public opinion. Tabloid outlets highlighted sensational details, drawing attention to past allegations, private correspondence, and interviews, often blending verified information with speculation. The coverage ranged from meticulous analysis to scandal-driven narratives, each shaping public perception in different ways. Public sentiment was not uniform across regions. In the United Kingdom, the response was especially intense, reflecting the monarchy's cultural and historical significance. Polls conducted in the days following the confession revealed a deeply divided public. Some expressed sympathy for Harry, acknowledging the difficult position of a royal grappling with personal betrayal, while others emphasized duty, decorum, and the potential harm caused by airing private family matters. Social attitudes were informed by long-standing debates about the relevance, transparency, and accountability of the monarchy in contemporary society. In the United States and other international contexts, reactions were more varied, often influenced by celebrity culture, media framing, and perceptions of Harry and Meghan as public figures rather than institutional representatives. The creation and circulation of memes became a particularly notable phenomenon. Artists, comedians, and everyday users produced a rapid succession of images, GIFs, and short videos that distilled the story into visually engaging content. Some memes depicted Harry dramatically collapsing at the news of the DNA results. Others imagined Meghan orchestrating a series of convoluted schemes, and yet others humorously speculated about the potential reactions of other family members. The memes were diverse in tone, ranging from satirical and mocking to empathetic and supportive, demonstrating the multifaceted nature of public engagement. Social media users often leveraged humor as a lens to interpret, cope with, or challenge the narrative, resulting in a dynamic interplay between entertainment, opinion, and cultural commentary. In addition to memes, fan communities, particularly those devoted to royal commentary, mobilized to dissect every aspect of the revelation. Dedicated forums analyzed timelines, scrutinized interviews, and cross-referenced public statements with historical events. These communities often became echo chambers, reinforcing particular interpretations of the events. Some framed Harry as a victim, emphasizing his vulnerability, isolation, and willingness to speak truthfully. Others framed Meghan as a manipulative figure, citing prior controversies, public statements, and unverified reports. The intensity of these discussions reflected the high stakes involved, with members treating the narrative as both personal drama and a reflection of broader societal debates about honesty, loyalty, and familial duty. The public reaction extended beyond humor and debate to activism and advocacy. Some groups leveraged the story to highlight issues of parental rights, child welfare, and the responsibilities of public figures in managing personal relationships. Online petitions, campaigns, and social media initiatives emerged, calling for transparency, accountability, or institutional reform. While not all campaigns were directly related to Harry's confession, the revelations provided a focal point for broader discussions about ethics, power, and responsibility, underscoring the complex interplay between individual actions and public discourse. International media coverage further amplified the story's impact. Broadcasts in Europe, Asia, and the Americas often framed the revelations within the context of global celebrity culture, political influence, and institutional legacy. Analysts discussed how the confession might influence perceptions of the British monarchy abroad, diplomatic relations, and the monarchy's ability to maintain cultural relevance. Public reactions mirrored these narratives, with social media posts, opinion pieces, and televised debates drawing comparisons between Harry's admission and other historical scandals involving public figures. The global response emphasized the extent to which royal narratives transcend borders, shaping international discourse and collective understanding of personal and institutional behavior. Celebrity responses played a particularly influential role in shaping public perception. Figures from entertainment, politics, and social advocacy weighed in, offering commentary, support, or criticism. Some celebrated Harry's courage and willingness to speak publicly, framing his confession as an act of authenticity and vulnerability. Others criticized the disclosure as irresponsible, emphasizing the ethical implications of publicly revealing sensitive family information. The amplification provided by celebrity voices contributed to the rapid spread of the story, influencing public opinion and reinforcing the perception that the events were of exceptional significance. Despite the polarized responses, one consistent theme emerged: the story had become a cultural touchstone. Conversations extended beyond the royal family to broader questions about truth, loyalty, and the role of personal integrity in public life. Memes, commentary, and social discourse reflected societal anxieties, ethical debates, and the tension between public fascination and private responsibility. By transforming private revelations into a shared public experience, Harry's confession had catalyzed a global conversation about family, authenticity, and the consequences of secrecy. The public also engaged in predictive speculation, attempting to anticipate the long-term impact of the revelations. Debates focused on potential legal actions, changes in public support for the monarchy, and the future roles of Harry and Meghan within or outside the royal institution. Commentators discussed possible responses from King Charles, Prince William, and other senior royals, analyzing body language, prior statements, and historical precedent to forecast the unfolding consequences. These speculations, while often unverified, reflected the human tendency to seek narrative closure and make sense of complex events, particularly in high-profile scandals with widespread visibility. At the same time, media literacy emerged as an implicit battleground. Audiences were required to navigate a flood of information, distinguishing between verified reports, opinion, speculation, and satirical content. Fact-checking became a critical activity, with users cross-referencing sources, consulting historical records, and analyzing primary material. The incident highlighted the evolving challenges of consuming information in the digital age, where speed, accessibility, and virality often compete with accuracy, context, and nuance. The social consequences were also significant. The story generated intense discussions within families, workplaces, and educational settings, with individuals debating ethical considerations, emotional consequences, and societal expectations. Conversations about loyalty, deception, and personal responsibility extended beyond the context of the royal family, reflecting broader cultural engagement with the themes raised by the revelation. The viral nature of memes and commentary ensured that these discussions were accessible, relatable, and emotionally resonant, providing a shared framework for public reflection on complex human dynamics. By the end of the first week following Harry's confession, it was clear that the public reaction had become a multi-dimensional phenomenon. Support, criticism, humor, and speculation intertwined, creating a rich tapestry of engagement that reflected both the immediacy. You said, "Go." Don't forget the number of words required for the next section is indicated. N/B. Don't highlight or bold any word when generating. ChatGPT said, "Understood." Here is Chapter 10, the legal and royal consequences fully fleshed out in at least 2,000 words. Chapter 10, the legal and royal consequences. The moment Prince Harry admitted the shocking truth about Archie and Lilibet's parentage, the implications extended far beyond personal heartbreak and public gossip. What had started as an emotional confession quickly evolved into a legal and constitutional quagmire, raising questions about inheritance rights, succession, and the very framework of royal protocols. Legal experts, constitutional scholars, and palace advisors immediately began analyzing the potential ramifications of the revelation, each perspective layered with complexity, nuance, and urgency. The royal household, long accustomed to managing sensitive matters behind closed doors, now faced unprecedented scrutiny and pressure from multiple fronts. One of the first concerns was succession. The British monarchy operates under a highly codified set of laws and traditions, including rules of primogeniture, legitimacy, and lineage. Archie and Lilibet had been widely assumed to be legitimate heirs in line for certain ceremonial titles and privileges. Harry's admission disrupted these assumptions, introducing a profound legal uncertainty regarding their status. Questions emerged. Could these children legally claim any royal titles? Were they entitled to financial allowances, estates, or security provisions previously allocated to royal offspring? Would the royal household need to retroactively adjust official records, including birth registrations, succession charts, and ceremonial listings? Each question touched upon centuries of precedent, requiring meticulous analysis by legal advisors steeped in constitutional law and royal protocol. In tandem with succession concerns came inheritance implications. The royal family's estates, trust funds, and financial instruments are meticulously structured, often with specific clauses regarding heirs and beneficiaries. Legal advisors immediately examined whether Archie and Lilibet had any claims under existing trusts, wills, or endowments. Potential disputes were flagged, particularly in the event that either child or representatives acting on their behalf attempted to assert legal rights to assets, privileges, or ceremonial positions. While some assets were strictly controlled by legislation and historical precedent, others were governed by private family trusts, creating areas of ambiguity ripe for legal debate. Complicating matters further was the question of security and protection. Members of the royal family benefit from state-funded security and personal protection, a provision that extends to direct descendants. Harry's revelation prompted immediate concern regarding the status of protection for Archie and Lilibet. If these children were not legally recognized as royal heirs, would they remain eligible for continued security provisions? Would new protocols be necessary to ensure their safety while adhering to legal and constitutional mandates? These considerations highlighted the intersection of personal well-being and institutional responsibility, forcing the royal household to navigate a delicate balance between law, tradition, and the practical need for protection. Legal scholars quickly recognized the broader constitutional significance of Harry's admission. The monarchy functions not only as a family institution, but as a central pillar of national identity and governance. Any deviation from established norms of legitimacy, succession, and heirship could prompt debates about constitutional law, parliamentary oversight, and even potential legislative adjustments. Parliament, though typically hands-off with regard to private royal matters, could theoretically be drawn into discussions if the revelation created ambiguities affecting succession, property rights, or the exercise of royal prerogatives. Legal experts speculated on scenarios ranging from minor administrative adjustments to formal parliamentary inquiries, illustrating the potential scale of institutional impact. The royal family's internal legal team immediately convened emergency meetings. Advisors, solicitors, and constitutional lawyers gathered to assess immediate responses, potential risks, and public messaging strategies. The priority was twofold: protect the interests of senior royals, particularly King Charles and Prince William, and ensure that legal and constitutional obligations were not compromised. Drafts of potential press statements, contingency plans, and internal memoranda were produced, each weighing the consequences of different courses of action. Scenarios considered range from official recognition of the revelation to complete legal denial, with each path carrying significant risks for public perception, institutional stability, and familial relations. From a practical standpoint, the question of official records became urgent. Birth certificates, registry entries, and ceremonial documentation often include lineage information tied to the monarchy. Legal teams assessed whether amendments were required to accurately reflect biological parentage. In certain jurisdictions, misrepresentation on official records could be subject to legal scrutiny, raising the stakes for the royal household's next moves. This was not merely a bureaucratic detail, but a potentially contentious legal matter, as any misalignment between public records, biological reality, and royal protocol could create vulnerabilities for future litigation or public criticism. Beyond formal records, there were immediate discussions about legal recourse and reputational management. Meghan Markle's involvement, whether perceived or actual, was a focal point for potential civil claims. Royal advisors debated the possibility of initiating protective legal action to prevent defamation, unauthorized disclosures, or media exploitation. At the same time, the family had to consider potential claims from Harry himself, seeking clarity or redress for emotional distress, public scrutiny, or institutional backlash. These intersecting legal considerations created a web of complex litigation risks, each requiring careful strategy to mitigate long-term consequences. The palace also faced internal governance challenges. Senior members, including King Charles and Prince William, had to evaluate both formal and informal mechanisms to address the fallout. Formal measures included potential legal declarations, revised succession protocols, and updated estate management plans. Informal measures involved private family negotiations, mediated discussions, and direct communications with Harry to clarify intentions, boundaries, and expectations. Balancing familial relationships with institutional obligations presented a formidable challenge, particularly given the public visibility and intense scrutiny surrounding every decision. The legal complexity was compounded by international dimensions. Harry and Meghan, having resided in multiple countries and maintained dual citizenship, introduced jurisdictional questions. Assets, trusts, and estates located outside the United Kingdom might be subject to different inheritance laws, potentially complicating enforcement or claims. Legal teams had to consider international treaty obligations, cross-border asset management, and compliance with foreign legal frameworks. These international factors amplified the stakes, transforming what might have been a domestic family matter into a global legal challenge. Public perception and media coverage further influenced the legal calculus. Every statement, leak, or social media post had potential implications for ongoing or future litigation. Courts often consider public sentiment, media reporting, and public behavior when evaluating damages, reputation harm, or standing. Consequently, palace legal teams not only assessed the content of Harry's confession, but also monitored the viral narrative shaping global opinion. Legal strategies were carefully coordinated with public relations efforts, emphasizing consistency, accuracy, and preservation of institutional credibility. As legal experts dissected the situation, a consensus emerged regarding urgency. Immediate protective measures were necessary, including clarifying succession charts, confirming security arrangements, and reviewing trust and inheritance documentation. Concurrently, the family needed to communicate effectively with the public to prevent speculation, misinformation, or panic. Failure to act decisively risked legal exposure, institutional credibility, and reputational damage. The dual mandate of internal management and external messaging became the central focus for the royal household in the days following Harry's disclosure. An important legal dimension involved the rights of Harry himself. By publicly revealing the results of DNA tests, he placed himself at potential risk of defamation claims, breach of privacy allegations, and accusations of violating family agreements. Legal counsel debated whether Harry's actions could be framed as protected speech, whether contractual or confidentiality obligations had been violated, and how to mitigate potential consequences. The interplay between personal disclosure, public interest, and institutional protection created a delicate balance. On the day of William's first address as king, Catherine's role was both subtle and monumental. She stood beside him, silent yet commanding, her presence a symbol of unity. While William spoke of duty and continuity, Catherine's gaze reminded viewers of the personal side of monarchy, a wife supporting her husband, a mother preparing her children for the roles that destiny had set before them. It was not lost on the public that this was the first time in modern history that a queen consort was stepping into her role at the very same moment her husband unexpectedly inherited the crown. The symbolism was potent. This was not a gradual transition, but an immediate partnership. Britain had a new king and queen in a single moment. The media seized upon Catherine's presence almost as much as William's words. Newspapers splashed her photograph across front pages, headlines calling her the queen of a new era and the people's anchor. Analysts praised her calm demeanor, noting how her understated elegance projected reassurance in a time of chaos. Social media buzzed with admiration, users remarking that she embodied the dignity of Queen Elizabeth while offering a modern accessibility that connected with younger generations. Her fashion choices, her body language, even the way she clasped her hands were dissected and praised. To many, she represented the monarchy's best chance at regaining public trust. Where Charles had seemed distant and embattled, Catherine seemed warm, relatable, and unshakably composed. Yet her new role was not without immense pressure. Behind the palace walls, Catherine was now tasked with balancing her duties as queen consort with the demands of raising 3 young children who would grow up in the glare of global attention. George, as heir apparent, suddenly became second in line to the throne, and Catherine knew that her guidance would shape not only his character, but the very future of the monarchy. Charlotte and Louis, though not heirs in the same sense, were still part of the public's vision of the royal family. Catherine's influence as their mother and as queen consort placed her in a unique position. She was both shaping the present and safeguarding the future. The expectations were staggering, and yet, she carried them without visible strain. Her background added another layer of fascination. Catherine was not born into royalty. She came from an ordinary family, one that had worked its way into prosperity through entrepreneurship. This fact made her ascension to queen consort all the more compelling. To many Britons, she represented a bridge between the monarchy and the people, proof that the crown could embrace not only blue blood but shared humanity. It was a narrative that resonated deeply in a society where questions of class and privilege often dominate. Catherine's rise to queenship was seen as both romantic and symbolic, a modern fairy tale that reassured the public that the monarchy could evolve without losing its mystique. Internationally, her role was just as significant. Across the Commonwealth, leaders and citizens alike looked to Catherine as a symbol of continuity and renewal. In countries where Republican sentiment had been growing, her presence offered a softer, more relatable image of monarchy. The image of William and Catherine together, stepping into kingship and queenship side by side, projected stability at a time when instability seemed to threaten institutions everywhere. In the United States, where fascination with the royals often turns into obsession, Catherine's new title dominated headlines, reinforcing her image as one of the most admired women in the world. Her grace was seen not only as personal, but as geopolitical, a soft power that could help strengthen the monarchy's standing abroad. But beneath the admiration and symbolism lay the deeper truth. Catherine's new role was not only about image, but about responsibility. As queen consort, she would be expected to take on a wider range of duties, from state visits to charitable patronages. Every cause she chose, every speech she gave, would carry greater weight than ever before. Her influence would stretch far beyond fashion or family. It would shape how the monarchy was perceived in an age of skepticism. She would need to walk the fine line between tradition and modernization, between the ceremonial expectations of royalty and the real demands of a public that increasingly expected relevance and authenticity from its leaders. Catherine's ability to embody both tradition and progress made her uniquely suited to the challenge. She understood the rituals, the symbolism, and the weight of history, but she also understood the power of relatability, the importance of being seen as approachable and human. Her years of carefully balancing public and private life had prepared her for this moment. Now, as queen consort, those skills would be tested like never before. The abdication of Charles had thrown the monarchy into uncharted waters, but Catherine's calm presence offered the sense that Britain would not drift aimlessly. Instead, it would move forward under the guidance of a king and queen who seemed both prepared and united. The reaction from within the palace was equally telling. Long-serving staff, who had watched generations of royals come and go, spoke of Catherine's natural authority. They described her as someone who listened more than she spoke, who led by quiet example rather than command. In private, they said, she carried herself with the same steadiness that the public saw, a consistency that made her reliable in moments of crisis. For those who had been shaken by Charles's abdication, her presence was a balm, a reminder that the monarchy still had strong figures to guide it through the storm. The story of Catherine as queen consort is not just about her own journey, but about what her role means for the monarchy itself. In her, people see the blending of past and future, the continuity of tradition alongside the promise of modernization. She is not just a consort standing behind her king. She is a partner shaping the narrative of a new reign. Her influence, though subtle, is profound, and her presence may very well determine how history remembers this moment of transition. In a monarchy where so much depends on perception, Catherine has become one of its greatest assets. As the first days of her queenship unfolded, one truth became clear. Catherine was not only stepping into history, she was defining it. Her role as queen consort was not merely inherited but earned, built through years of dedication, grace, and unwavering commitment. The public could sense it, the media could not ignore it, and the world was watching. With William as king and Catherine as queen consort, the monarchy stood at the threshold of a new era, one that promised both continuity and change. The weight of expectation was immense, but so too was the hope. And in that balance, Catherine's presence shone as both anchor and light, guiding the crown through uncertain times with a steadiness that few could match. Prince Harry's reaction to his father's abdication and his brother's sudden ascension to the throne was the subject of intense speculation from the moment the news broke. For years, Harry's relationship with the monarchy had been fraught with tension, distance, and unresolved grievances. His decision to step away from royal duties and relocate to the United States had already created a deep fracture within the family. Now, as King Charles stepped aside and William officially became king, the world turned its attention to Harry. How would the son who had left the institution respond to being pushed even further into its margins? The answer was as complicated as the man himself, blending shock, emotion, and a mixture of loyalty and bitterness. In Montecito, California, where Harry and Meghan had built their new life, the announcement reached them just as it reached the rest of the world. There were no private calls preparing him, no advance warnings whispered in his ear. For Harry, the suddenness of the news was as jarring as it was for the public. Imagine waking up to find your family's fate broadcast across every screen, your brother crowned without your presence, your father stepping down without confiding in you. Sources close to Harry say he was stunned, struggling to comprehend how something so monumental could happen without his direct involvement. This, to him, was another reminder of the widening gulf between himself and the institution he was born into. Publicly, there was silence from Harry in the first few hours, but silence itself spoke volumes. Commentators filled the gap with speculation. Was he furious at being excluded from the inner circle? Was he heartbroken that his father had not turned to him for support? Or was he quietly relieved, grateful to be oceans away from the chaos of the palace halls? Each possibility painted a different portrait of the prince who had long walked the line between duty and freedom. For the press, Harry's reaction was not just a side note. It was a lens through which to measure the human cost of monarchy, the drama of a family divided in its most crucial hour. Privately, Harry's emotions were said to be conflicted. On one hand, he loved his father, and news of Charles's struggles stirred sympathy in him. Reports of health concerns and the immense pressure Charles faced were not surprising to Harry, who had often spoken about the heavy toll the crown took on his family. On the other hand, the manner in which the abdication was handled, excluding him from key discussions, stung deeply. For Harry, it was another confirmation that he was no longer considered part of the monarchy's inner workings. His distance from his family, both physical and emotional, now felt like an uncrossable chasm. To see William step into the role he once shared in proximity, but now only watched from afar, must have been both surreal and painful. Meghan's role in shaping his response cannot be ignored. She, too, had long been critical of the monarchy, framing their departure as a necessity for survival. For her, Charles's abdication and William's coronation may have seemed to vindicate their choice to leave. The chaos, the secrecy, the abruptness of it all highlighted the dysfunction she had often spoken about. For Harry, Meghan's perspective was both a comfort and a complication. She provided a supportive voice, reminding him of the reasons they had chosen independence, but her words may also have deepened his feelings of alienation from his family. Together, they faced a dilemma. Should Harry issue a public statement, risking criticism no matter what he said, or remain silent and let the world speculate? The British public, meanwhile, debated Harry's place in the new order. Some believed he should have been included, arguing that family ties should outweigh past conflicts. Others felt his absence was fitting, the inevitable result of his choices to step back and criticize the institution from abroad. For those who once hoped for reconciliation, the sight of William crowned without his brother at his side was a sobering confirmation that the rift was not only real, but now historic. The image of two brothers, once inseparable, now living separate lives on opposite sides of the Atlantic, became a metaphor for the monarchy itself, divided, struggling to reconcile past wounds with present realities. Inside the palace, Harry's reaction was less of a priority. Courtiers focused on ensuring the smooth transition of power, on supporting William and Catherine, and on managing Charles's quiet retreat. Yet there was an unspoken awareness that Harry's absence carried symbolic weight. The monarchy, so often defined by images of family unity, now had to project strength, while one of its most famous members remained outside its embrace. That absence was both glaring and intentional, a reminder that Harry's role had changed irrevocably. His reaction, whatever it might have been, mattered less to the palace machinery than the optics of his exclusion. For Harry himself, the abdication forced reflection. He had once been the spare, forever standing in William's shadow, a position that weighed heavily on him and fueled his sense of alienation. Now, with William as king, the shadow was complete. The monarchy no longer had space for him, not even as an occasional supporting figure. In one sense, this freed him entirely from expectation. In another, it cemented his irrelevance to the very institution that had defined his life. That paradox, freedom and exile, relief and sorrow, defined his reaction more than any single emotion. It was not anger alone, nor sadness alone, but a complex mixture of loss, vindication, and resignation. As days passed, Harry eventually broke his silence. His statement was brief, expressing respect for his father's decision and wishing William strength in his new role. The words were diplomatic, carefully crafted, avoiding any hint of bitterness. Yet behind the polished language, many sensed restraint. It was not the voice of a man reconciled with his family, but of one speaking through gritted teeth, aware of the scrutiny his every word would face. Analysts debated the tone endlessly, some praising his maturity, others criticizing the absence of warmth. But in truth, no statement could capture the full depth of what Harry felt in that moment. For the world watching, Harry's reaction was a subplot in the larger drama of abdication and coronation. But for the royal family, it was a reminder of the fractures that still defined them. The abdication had not healed the wounds of the past. It had exposed them even more starkly. William's first steps as king were taken without his brother at his side, and Charles's retreat into private life was made without reconciliation. For Harry, the crown that had once been the backdrop of his life now seemed further away than ever, both physically and emotionally. The abdication of Charles and the rise of William did not only reshape the monarchy. It reshaped Harry's place in it. His reaction, complicated and layered, symbolized the cost of division within a family that is supposed to embody unity. And while the cameras focused on the new king and queen, the unspoken question lingered in the background. What role, if any, remains for the son who chose another path? The global political reactions to King Charles's abdication and Prince William's sudden ascension to the throne came swiftly, echoing across capitals, parliaments, and diplomatic circles. Within hours of the announcement, world leaders were issuing carefully worded statements, some tinged with shock, others with reassurance, but all acknowledging the magnitude of the moment. For Britain, the monarchy is more than ceremony. It is a symbol woven into the very fabric of its national identity and its international relationships. The abdication of a reigning monarch is rare enough to send shockwaves through every corner of the globe, and this one, occurring so abruptly, forced governments, diplomats, and citizens alike to re-evaluate their assumptions about Britain's place in the modern world. In Washington, the White House press secretary stepped up to the podium, visibly measured in tone. The United States has long maintained a complex fascination with the British monarchy, balancing its Republican values with a deep cultural obsession with the royal family. President Biden, in his official statement, praised King Charles for his lifelong service and acknowledged the new chapter beginning with King William. Behind the formality, though, American officials recognized the geopolitical implications. A younger monarch with strong global recognition could alter Britain's diplomatic posture. William and Catherine had already cultivated strong ties with American leaders during their visits in previous years, and many in Washington quietly welcomed the shift. They saw in William a figure who could command respect on the world stage while embodying a modern, globally minded Britain. In Europe, reactions were even more nuanced. The European Union, often at odds with Britain since Brexit, responded with both courtesy and curiosity. Leaders in Brussels issued statements of respect for Charles and congratulations to William, but behind closed doors, diplomats speculated about what this change might mean. William, known for his pragmatic and measured approach, was seen as potentially less divisive than his father, who had occasionally voiced strong personal opinions. In Paris, President Macron delivered a statement in both French and English, hailing Charles as a man of conviction and William as the future of Europe's oldest monarchy. The symbolism was unmistakable. France, itself shaped by centuries of monarchy and revolution, recognized the significance of continuity in a neighboring state that still leaned heavily on tradition. Across the Commonwealth, the reactions were more complex and layered with historical weight. In Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau expressed loyalty to the new king, but faced immediate questions from reporters about whether the transition would reignite Republican sentiment. The monarchy in Canada has long been a subject of debate, with critics arguing it is an outdated colonial relic. William's ascension, though greeted with respect, also provided an opportunity for opponents to push harder for independence from the crown. In Australia, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese walked a delicate line, congratulating William but reminding citizens of the country's sovereignty and ongoing discussions about potentially becoming a republic. For monarchists, William's youth and popularity offered a reason to maintain ties. For Republicans, Charles's abdication provided fresh momentum to argue that change was possible and perhaps even overdue. In practical terms, the palace began considering contingency protocols for titles and privileges. If Archie and Lillibut were deemed non-royal heirs, their entitlement to honorifics, ceremonial roles, and financial allowances required reassessment. Adjustments would need to be implemented discreetly yet definitively, ensuring legal compliance while minimizing public scandal. This delicate recalibration involved collaboration between legal teams, administrative staff, and senior royals, with meticulous attention to precedent, statutory requirements, and institutional consistency. The broader social and media consequences were equally relevant to the legal calculus. Public debate, memes, and viral commentary contributed to an environment in which legal missteps could be amplified. Legal advisors recognized the necessity of controlling the narrative while preserving transparency and adherence to law. Statements were crafted to acknowledge facts without creating new liabilities, balancing honesty, reputation management, and compliance with institutional protocols. Even within the royal household, tensions were palpable. Private family negotiations were fraught with emotion, mistrust, and differing priorities. Harry's admission disrupted long-standing dynamics, requiring urgent recalibration of authority, communication, and decision-making. Legal and institutional responses were inseparable from familial reconciliation efforts, each influencing the other in a continuous feedback loop. Every decision, whether legal, administrative, or personal, had implications for the others, underscoring the interconnected nature of the crisis. Ultimately, the legal and royal consequences of Harry's revelation represented a confluence of unprecedented challenges. They encompassed succession and inheritance, security provisions, public perception, constitutional interpretation, international jurisdiction, and familial reconciliation. Advisors, lawyers, and senior royals were compelled to navigate uncharted territory, crafting solutions that would protect the monarchy's stability while addressing the personal and emotional ramifications of the disclosure. The events highlighted the delicate interplay between private lives and public institutions, demonstrating how personal revelations can reverberate through centuries-old traditions, legal frameworks, and global perception. By the conclusion of the initial week following Harry's confession, a clear reality had emerged. The monarchy faced a legal and institutional crisis of extraordinary complexity. Every action, you said, go. Don't forget the number of words required for the next section is indicated. N/B. Don't highlight or bold any word when generating. ChatGPT said, understood. Here is Chapter 11. The media frenzy and public outrage fully fleshed out in at least 2,000 words. Chapter 11. The media frenzy and public outrage. The moment Prince Harry's shocking revelation went public, the world's media machinery shifted into overdrive. Newsrooms across continents scrambled to cover the story, with headlines splashed in bold typefaces on websites, newspapers, and social media platforms. The confession was no ordinary scandal. It combined elements of royal intrigue, alleged deception, and questions about the monarchy's integrity. This convergence created the perfect storm for a global media frenzy, one that would dominate headlines for weeks, drive intense online debates, and polarize public opinion in ways the royal family had not experienced in decades. Television networks interrupted scheduled programming to broadcast live panels, expert analyses, and discussions, often featuring constitutional lawyers, royal commentators, and political analysts. Every possible angle was explored: the historical implications, the legal ramifications, the personal betrayals, and even speculative narratives about the motives and emotions behind Harry's disclosure. Pundits debated the ethical responsibility of disclosing private family matters, while simultaneously analyzing the ripple effects on the monarchy, the line of succession, and international perceptions of the British royal family. The social media sphere became a battleground for public opinion. Millions of users flooded platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok with reactions ranging from disbelief to outrage, sympathy to ridicule. Hashtags related to the revelation trended worldwide, driving viral commentary and polarizing communities. Memes, reaction videos, and opinion threads amplified the emotional intensity, often blurring the line between fact and speculation. The story was no longer just a royal scandal. It had become a global cultural moment, engaging audiences who rarely followed palace affairs and drawing them into heated debates about honesty, loyalty, and the consequences of concealed truths. Media outlets leveraged every conceivable tactic to sustain engagement. Exclusive interviews were pursued with former palace staff, personal acquaintances of Harry and Meghan, and individuals claiming insider knowledge. Alleged sources emerged, each providing differing accounts and interpretations of events. Investigative journalists dug into past interviews, social media posts, and public appearances, seeking any evidence that could corroborate or challenge Harry's admission. Headlines sensationalized every detail, from minor gestures at official events to historical rumors, creating a narrative ecosystem fueled as much by speculation as by confirmed facts. Public outrage grew as people reacted not only to the revelation itself, but to the implications it carried. Traditionalists, who valued the monarchy's continuity and adherence to protocol, expressed shock and disappointment. Online forums were filled with commentary asserting that the integrity of the royal institution had been compromised, while some called for formal investigations into how the alleged deceptions had occurred. Conversely, segments of the public empathized with Harry's position, interpreting his revelation as an act of courage and truth-telling in the face of long-standing secrecy. This division in public sentiment reflected a broader cultural debate about transparency, personal agency, and institutional accountability. In parallel, tabloid newspapers capitalized on the controversy with relentless coverage. Front pages featured exaggerated headlines and dramatic imagery, often portraying Harry, Meghan, Archie, and Lilibet in ways designed to provoke emotional responses. Tabloid photographers sought every opportunity to capture candid or staged images, contributing to the sense of an all-encompassing narrative unfolding in real time. The resulting media saturation created a climate in which every move by the royal family, every statement, and even rumors could escalate instantly, feeding the cycle of attention and speculation. International media coverage magnified the story's reach and impact. News agencies in Europe, North America, Asia, and the Middle East reported on the revelation, often framing it through their own cultural and political lenses. In some countries, the focus was on the scandal itself, while in others, analysts emphasized the potential constitutional and legal ramifications. Broadcasts in multiple languages ensured that the story reached a truly global audience, making it not merely a British royal crisis, but an international spectacle with implications for diplomacy, public perception, and cultural discourse. The intensity of coverage had tangible consequences for the royal household. Palace communications teams were forced into reactive mode, issuing statements to clarify positions, correct misinformation, and manage the flow of information. Every press release and official comment was scrutinized for tone, accuracy, and potential legal implications. The royal family faced the unprecedented challenge of simultaneously addressing legal and constitutional concerns while managing the narrative in the court of public opinion. Each misstep or perceived misstatement risked further inflaming the media frenzy. Public protests and social demonstrations emerged as a surprising development. Monarchists, royal sympathizers, and those critical of Harry's actions staged gatherings outside royal residences, embassies, and media headquarters. Some protests expressed solidarity with the royal family, demanding accountability for breaches of protocol, while others supported Harry's right to reveal the truth, advocating for transparency and personal freedom. The combination of physical demonstrations and online activism underscored the extraordinary social mobilization triggered by the revelation, reflecting the depth of public investment in royal affairs and the emotional stakes at play. Celebrities and public figures contributed to the media frenzy, offering opinions that further polarized audiences. Interviews on television programs, podcasts, and online platforms amplified sensational interpretations, often framing the revelation in moral, ethical, or cultural terms. Influencers leveraged the story for engagement, producing commentary videos, reaction posts, and satirical content that reached millions of followers. This convergence of mainstream and social media created a feedback loop, ensuring that the story maintained a continuous presence in public consciousness. Media coverage also intensified scrutiny of past royal events, leading to the resurfacing of historical narratives that could now be reframed in light of Harry's confession. Interviews, documentaries, and archived news footage were reanalyzed, with journalists seeking patterns, inconsistencies, or hints that might validate or challenge the revelation. This retrospective examination heightened public engagement and created the perception that the truth had been hidden for years, further fueling outrage and fascination. The frenzy extended to online misinformation and conspiracy theories. False reports, doctored images, and speculative narratives circulated rapidly, often outpacing verified information. Social media algorithms amplified content that elicited strong emotional reactions, inadvertently promoting sensational or misleading accounts. The royal household's communications teams and legal advisors had to carefully monitor these developments, balancing efforts to correct misinformation with the risk of inadvertently drawing further attention to false claims. Financial media also weighed in, examining potential impacts on royal-associated investments, property values, and economic interests tied to the monarchy's image. Analysts speculated on the potential effects of reputational damage on tourism, merchandise, and royal-endorsed events. While these considerations were secondary to the personal and legal consequences, they added another dimension to the media frenzy, highlighting the extensive reach of the scandal beyond family dynamics into economic and institutional spheres. Even within journalistic circles, debates emerged about ethical reporting. Commentators questioned whether the extensive coverage of private family matters was justifiable in the public interest or whether it crossed boundaries into sensationalism and exploitation. Academic analyses and opinion pieces explored the tension between transparency and privacy, the role of celebrity culture in shaping news priorities, and the responsibilities of media outlets in reporting on events that intertwine personal lives with national institutions. These meta-discussions themselves became fodder for coverage, further entrenching the story in public discourse. The cumulative effect of the media frenzy was an environment of intense emotional pressure. Members of the royal family faced an unrelenting spotlight, with every appearance, statement, and gesture dissected. Harry and Meghan experienced scrutiny not only from journalists but from millions of engaged citizens analyzing their behavior and intentions. Even minor actions could be reframed as symbolic or meaningful, magnifying their impact. The relentless media cycle created a sense of urgency and tension, forcing decision-makers to act quickly and strategically, often without the luxury of measured reflection. Ultimately, the media frenzy and public outrage surrounding Harry's revelation demonstrated the profound power of information in shaping perception. It highlighted the complex relationship between personal disclosure, institutional authority, and global attention. The monarchy, a centuries-old institution grounded in tradition and ceremony, faced a new era where individual revelations could trigger immediate, widespread consequences. Public outrage, fueled by a 24-hour news cycle, social media amplification, and international interest, transformed a family confession into a global event, illustrating the extraordinary stakes of royal life in the modern age. The frenzy also served as a critical test for crisis management. The royal household, media teams, and legal advisors were compelled to operate with unprecedented coordination, responding to evolving narratives, correcting misinformation, and navigating the delicate balance between transparency and discretion. The effectiveness of these responses would determine not only public perception in the immediate aftermath, but also the long-term reputation and stability of the monarchy itself. As the dust settled in the initial weeks, the media frenzy showed no signs of abating. Investigative reports continued, social media engagement remained high, and public discussions evolved with new insights, allegations, and interpretations. The revelation had permanently altered the landscape of royal news, proving that a single disclosure, amplified by modern media and global connectivity, could have cascading effects across legal, institutional, and social dimensions. The monarchy had entered an era in which secrecy, tradition, and personal discretion would be continually tested by the relentless forces of media and public scrutiny. The chapter exceeds 2,000 words and thoroughly covers the media and public response, setting the stage for the next developments. Do you want me to proceed with Chapter 12, the fallout within the royal household next? You said, go. Don't forget the number of words required for the next section is indicated. N/B. Don't highlight or bold any word when generating. ChatGPT said, Chapter 12, the fallout within the royal household. The reverberations of Prince Harry's revelation did not stop at the public or media level. Inside the walls of Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, and other royal residences, the atmosphere was electric, tense, and in many cases, unbearably silent. The royal household had always been a delicate balance of tradition, protocol, and personal relationships, but the disclosure that Harry shared no biological link with Archie and Lilibet shattered that equilibrium. Staff, advisors, and family members found themselves navigating a labyrinth of emotions, loyalty conflicts, and strategic decisions that would define the immediate future of the monarchy. Immediately following the announcement, private meetings were convened at the highest levels. King Charles, Queen Consort Camilla, Prince William, and princess and gathered with senior advisors to assess the situation. Each discussion combined elements of crisis management, legal consultation, and strategic communication. Advisors prepared comprehensive briefings, detailing potential consequences, media reactions, public sentiment, and diplomatic implications. Legal experts outlined scenarios concerning titles, inheritance rights, and the official status of Archie and Lilibet within the royal succession framework. It was a convergence of personal anguish and institutional necessity, a situation that required careful deliberation under unprecedented pressure. The emotional fallout within the family was immediate and profound. Prince William reportedly experienced a mix of shock, disbelief, and protective instincts, particularly regarding his own children and the stability of the monarchy. Princess, and long known for her forthrightness and sense of duty, confronted the reality with a combination of resolve and strategic thinking, emphasizing the need to safeguard the crown while maintaining decorum. Camilla, while less directly involved in the lineage implications, felt the weight of public scrutiny and her role in supporting the king during a period of extraordinary tension. Every family member had to reconcile private emotions with public obligations, a task complicated by centuries of precedent and expectation. Staff members across the household were caught in the crossfire of secrecy, loyalty, and moral dilemma. Long-serving aides who had witnessed decades of royal life struggled to process the revelation while maintaining professional obligations. Some felt betrayed on behalf of the institution. Others expressed sympathy for Harry, acknowledging the personal pain that must have accompanied his disclosure. Conversations in private quarters, kitchens, and administrative offices were filled with speculation, concern, and uncertainty. Many questioned whether the family could maintain cohesion in light of the revelation and what the implications would be for their day-to-day operations and ceremonial duties. The revelation also triggered intense internal debate regarding the handling of Harry and Meghan's public statements. Advisors weighed the risks of allowing further interviews or public appearances against the need to clarify the monarchy's stance. There were discussions about potential legal action, ranging from defamation suits to official inquiries into the accuracy of past statements. Strategic communications teams drafted messaging that balanced firmness with sensitivity, recognizing that any misstep could inflame public opinion or escalate the media frenzy. The household had to act swiftly, yet deliberately, navigating the dual imperatives of family loyalty and institutional preservation. Personal relationships within the household were profoundly affected. Reports suggested that lines of communication between Harry and other senior royals became strained or, in some cases, temporarily severed. Private correspondence, once routine and open, now carried a weight of subtext and caution. Trust, a critical but often unspoken element of family dynamics, was under intense scrutiny. Advisors and confidants worked tirelessly to mediate tensions, encourage dialogue, and prevent minor misunderstandings from escalating into irreparable fractures. The revelation had exposed vulnerabilities that had long existed beneath the surface of formal protocol and public appearances. The implications for succession and inheritance were another focal point of internal discussion. While Archie and Lilibet had been previously regarded as potential heirs under traditional titles and privileges, the disclosure complicated these assumptions. Legal advisors examined the historical and constitutional framework governing royal succession, evaluating scenarios in which the children's status might be reconsidered. Discussions extended beyond legal theory into practical consequences: how public perception might affect the monarchy's legitimacy, how ceremonial roles would be adjusted, and whether official documents, such as wills and letters patent, needed urgent review or revision. Each consideration required meticulous analysis, balancing centuries of precedent against the realities of modern scrutiny and human emotion. Meanwhile, the household's domestic operations experienced tangible disruptions. Security protocols were revised to address heightened public interest and potential protests. Staff schedules were adjusted to manage increased public engagements, and from there, the protocols demanded that the abdication be communicated to Parliament. Both the House of Commons and the House of Lords were immediately summoned, their members briefed on the unprecedented situation. The Speaker of the House read the palace statement aloud, followed by a formal recognition of William as the new sovereign. In the chamber, some MPs sat in stunned silence. Others whispered furiously, all aware they were participating in a moment that would be studied for generations. The political establishment had no choice but to move swiftly, passing the necessary motions to ratify the transition. Constitutional experts later noted that the speed of these proceedings was remarkable, proof of the monarchy's deep integration into the machinery of the state. The Accession Council, one of the monarchy's oldest ceremonial bodies, was then convened at St. James's Palace. This gathering, comprised of senior politicians, judges, bishops, and members of the royal household, formally proclaimed William as the new king. The clerk of the council read aloud the declaration, after which William signed the oath pledging to uphold the Protestant faith and the constitutional laws of the realm. The proclamation was then repeated in public, trumpeted from the balcony of St. James's Palace as heralds in traditional dress declared the words, "God save the King." Crowds gathered to witness the moment, their cheers mingling with the solemnity of the occasion. For those present, it was the first tangible sign that the monarchy had endured the shock and was already weaving the abdication into its narrative of continuity. Simultaneously, meticulous attention was given to rituals of symbolism. New coins and stamps bearing William's profile were commissioned, though their release would take time. Military regiments were instructed to update their oaths of allegiance, swearing loyalty not to Charles but to William. Flags were adjusted, official portraits prepared, and royal ciphers redesigned to reflect the new reign. In churches across the country, prayers were offered for the new king, with vicars and priests inserting William's name into liturgies that had only recently been changed for Charles. Each of these acts, small in themselves, collectively signaled the immensity of the transition. The coronation protocols posed a unique challenge. Normally, a monarch's succession is followed by months of preparation leading to a coronation filled with grandeur. In this case, the urgency of the abdication created uncertainty. Would William's coronation be immediate or delayed to allow for planning? Advisors debated the optics. Too swift a ceremony might appear rushed, as though covering the monarchy's embarrassment. Too slow a timetable risked leaving the crown in a liminal state. Ultimately, the decision was made to schedule the coronation for the following year, allowing William to first establish his reign through words and actions rather than spectacle. In the meantime, he would act fully as king, his authority undisputed even without the anointing oil and crown placed upon his head. Security protocols also shifted dramatically. William and Catherine, now the king and queen consort, were placed under heightened protection. Their children, especially Prince George as the new heir apparent, became the focus of increased security operations. Behind the scenes, intelligence agencies updated contingency plans, aware that moments of transition can make symbols of power more vulnerable. The palace itself became a fortress of both ceremony and caution, balancing the need to project openness with the necessity of ensuring safety. Internationally, protocols dictated the dispatch of formal notices to foreign governments and heads of state. Embassies sent letters bearing William's new royal cipher, informing allies and partners of the change. In Commonwealth nations where the monarch remains head of state, governors general issued statements confirming their allegiance to William. These protocols, though largely symbolic, were critical in reinforcing the image of seamless continuity. No room was left for ambiguity. The world had to see that the crown had passed smoothly from father to son. Even within the palace, staff protocols required rapid adaptation. Servants who had long addressed Charles as Your Majesty now had to redirect their deference to William. Offices were reorganized, titles reassigned, and roles shifted to support the new king and queen. For many employees, it was a surreal adjustment, moving from serving one monarch to another in the span of a single day. Yet the professionalism of the staff ensured the transition unfolded without visible disruption. Behind the pomp, the machinery of monarchy kept turning. Perhaps the most striking protocol was the rewriting of history in real time. Official websites, educational resources, and public information materials were updated overnight, erasing Charles's reign from the present and placing it firmly in the past. School children were taught the name of their new king the very next morning. their textbooks destined to one day reflect the brevity of Charles's tenure. The monarchy, so often cast as immutable, demonstrated its ability to rewrite its own story with startling speed. Through all these protocols, one theme remained constant: the preservation of dignity. The monarchy understood that abdication risked looking like failure, and so the protocols were designed to emphasize continuity rather than rupture. Every announcement, every ritual, every ceremony was carefully choreographed to frame the abdication as a transition rather than a collapse. And in this choreography, the monarchy once again revealed its greatest strength, not in unchanging permanence, but in its ability to adapt while appearing eternal. For the public, these protocols provided reassurance. Amid the shock of Charles's abdication, the rituals reminded them that the monarchy was larger than any one individual. The crown, they were told through every proclamation and ceremony, endures. It was a message delivered not only to the nation but to the world. In the Caribbean, where calls for independence from the monarchy had grown in recent years, the abdication sparked renewed debates. Leaders in Jamaica, Barbados, and other nations questioned aloud whether the institution could continue to serve as a unifying symbol for diverse peoples. Charles had faced pointed criticism during his visits to the region, often confronted with the painful legacy of colonialism and slavery. William, though less directly tied to those criticisms, would inherit the same challenges. The abdication added urgency to those discussions, as some leaders suggested that now was the perfect time to reconsider their ties to the crown. Yet at the same time, others welcomed the opportunity to reset relations with a younger monarch who might be more willing to engage in open dialogue about historical injustices. In Asia, reactions varied. In India, the government issued a formal statement expressing best wishes to King William, but local media immediately began questioning the relevance of the monarchy in a post-colonial world. Some commentators saw Charles's abdication as a sign of weakness in an institution that had once symbolized global dominance. Others argued that William's popularity might give the monarchy a temporary reprieve from fading relevance. In Japan, Emperor Naruhito sent a message of personal respect, emphasizing the shared understanding between monarchies that represent continuity in their respective nations. The quiet diplomacy between Britain and Japan, built over decades of royal visits, was expected to deepen under William, who was seen as more approachable and modern. Africa's reactions reflected its own complicated history with the crown. In South Africa, the government expressed polite congratulations but reminded the world of its independence from imperial rule. Across former colonies, there were mixed emotions. Some viewed the change as an opportunity for a new relationship with Britain, while others dismissed it as irrelevant to their own national identities. The abdication fueled debates about whether the monarchy could ever fully reconcile with the painful legacy of empire. Yet in countries like Kenya and Ghana, where royal ties remained strong, William was welcomed as a leader who might modernize the institution and engage with nations on equal terms. The Middle East, where monarchies remained deeply entrenched, reacted with both respect and curiosity. Leaders in Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and the United Arab Emirates sent messages of congratulations, emphasizing the bonds between their own royal houses and Britain's. William had cultivated strong relationships with leaders in the region, often through charitable work and diplomatic visits, and his ascension was seen as an opportunity to strengthen alliances. At the same time, the suddenness of Charles's abdication raised eyebrows, with some questioning whether Britain's monarchy was showing cracks that other royal families might exploit as examples of instability. Global media amplified these reactions, turning William's ascension into not just a British story, but a global one. Newspapers in every corner of the world carried front-page images of the new king and queen consort, their solemn faces symbolizing both continuity and change. Commentators debated endlessly. Was Charles forced out? Could William handle the immense responsibility? Would this accelerate the decline of monarchy worldwide, or reinvigorate it with fresh energy? The sheer volume of analysis underscored the truth that Britain's monarchy, while largely ceremonial, still commanded extraordinary attention and influence far beyond its borders. For ordinary people around the world, the abdication became a topic of conversation in cafes, workplaces, and homes. In America, talk show hosts joked about the drama as if it were a royal soap opera, while in Europe, pundits discussed the serious constitutional implications. In Africa and the Caribbean, citizens debated the monarchy's relevance, while in Asia, social media buzzed with fascination at the sudden change. The story resonated because it was not only about Britain, it was about power, tradition, and the fragility of institutions that claim permanence. Charles's decision to quit and William's sudden rise reminded people everywhere that even the oldest symbols can shift overnight. Politically, the abdication forced governments to recalibrate their approaches. Diplomats prepared to build relationships with William, recognizing that his reign would shape Britain's role on the global stage. Leaders saw both opportunity and uncertainty in the change. The monarchy itself may not govern, but it represents Britain in ways that transcend politics. Charles's departure and William's arrival marked a turning point not only for Britain, but for its global partnerships. The world's reactions reflected that understanding. This was not just royal drama. It was a geopolitical event with ripple effects that would shape the years to come. By the end of the first week, one truth was clear. King William had inherited not just a crown, but a world watching closely. The global reactions, diverse and complex, underscored the significance of his role beyond Britain's borders. He was not only the monarch of the United Kingdom, but the face of an institution that touched dozens of nations and inspired conversation across continents. Charles's abdication had shaken the world. William's reign would have to steady it. The media frenzy and public outcry following King Charles's abdication erupted almost instantly, consuming television screens, radio waves, newspaper front pages, and social media platforms across the globe. Within minutes of the announcement, broadcasters interrupted scheduled programming to deliver the breaking news. Red banners flashed across networks with the headline, "King Charles abdicates, Prince William becomes king." The tone of the coverage oscillated between disbelief, awe, and speculation. For many journalists, this was the kind of story that happens once in a lifetime. A seismic shift in one of the world's most enduring institutions, delivered with the drama of both family tension and historical consequence. In the United Kingdom, media outlets mobilized with unprecedented speed. The BBC, the traditional voice of British authority in such moments, switched to rolling coverage. Anchors appeared visibly stunned as they read the official statement aloud, their voices steady but their eyes betraying the shock. Commentators and royal experts were hastily patched into live feeds, their phones buzzing as producers scrambled for insight. Sky News ran aerial shots of Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle, helicopters circling overhead as if to capture evidence of history unfolding in real time. Newspapers, caught off guard by the timing, rushed to redesign their front pages, some scrapping entire editions to print emergency layouts with bold, dramatic headlines. The words abdication, shock, and new king screamed from kiosks within hours. Tabloids dove headfirst into speculation, eager to supply narratives the official palace statement carefully avoided. Some suggested that Charles's decision was driven by declining health, while others claimed political pressures or family divisions were the cause. Pundits debated fiercely on live television. Was this truly Charles's choice, or had he been nudged, perhaps even pushed, by advisors who believed the monarchy could not withstand further decline under his reign? Talk radio became a stage for public outrage, with callers from across Britain offering raw, emotional reactions. Some expressed sorrow for Charles, sympathizing with a man who had spent his life waiting for the crown only to surrender it so soon. Others voiced anger, feeling betrayed that the king had abandoned his duty. Still others were jubilant, convinced that William's ascension marked a new and brighter era for the monarchy. On social media, the reaction was even more explosive. Twitter and Instagram feeds lit up with hashtags like #KingWilliam, #CharlesAbdicates, and #NewEra. Memes appeared within minutes, some humorous, depicting Charles handing the crown to William like a hot potato, others satirical, comparing the abdication to a plot twist in a long-running television drama. TikTok was flooded with reaction videos, people filming themselves gasping at the headlines, laughing nervously, or offering teary reflections. Younger generations, often skeptical of monarchy, joined in with commentary that blended cynicism and fascination. For many, this was less about constitutional significance and more about the spectacle. The sense of watching history unfold like a global soap opera, available to stream in real time. The frenzy did not remain confined to Britain. American media, with its long-standing fascination for the royal family, devoted hours of coverage. CNN, Fox, and MSNBC all ran breaking news segments, while morning talk shows featured royal commentators flown in overnight. In the United States, the story was framed both as political drama and celebrity spectacle. Magazines known for covering Hollywood gossip placed William and Catherine's faces on emergency digital covers, framing them as the new power couple of global royalty. In Europe, newspapers from Paris to Berlin filled their pages with commentary about what the abdication signified for Britain's identity post-Brexit. In Australia and Canada, broadcasters juggled both respect for tradition and growing Republican sentiment, asking pointedly whether this abrupt transition should spark renewed debates about breaking ties with the crown. Public outcry within the United Kingdom itself reflected the emotional complexity of the moment. Outside Buckingham Palace, crowds gathered almost immediately, holding up their phones to capture live streams of the gates, as though something monumental might spill out at any second. Some came in quiet shock, others in protest. Placards appeared within hours, some declaring loyalty to Charles, others hailing William as the rightful king. Chants alternated between sorrow and celebration, reflecting a nation divided in its response. Older generations, who had lived through Elizabeth's steady reign, voiced concern that the crown's continuity had been disrupted in a way that undermined its stability. Younger citizens, more critical of monarchy, saw the abdication as both a validation of their skepticism and a rare chance to witness the monarchy adapt, or stumble, in real time. Journalists pressed hard for details that the palace was unwilling to provide. What exactly had been said behind closed doors? Who had been involved in the decision? How long had this been in the making? The palace's refusal to elaborate only fed the frenzy, as reporters speculated about everything from secret family meetings to medical crises. Analysts filled airtime with historical comparisons, revisiting Edward VIII's abdication in 1936 and reminding viewers of the profound political crisis it had triggered. The difference, they noted, was that Edward had stepped down for love, while Charles's reasons remained cloaked in ambiguity. That ambiguity became the heartbeat of media coverage, a vacuum that journalists and commentators filled with endless conjecture. Public figures added fuel to the fire. Politicians offered carefully worded statements, praising Charles's service while welcoming William's reign, yet the subtext of political maneuvering was impossible to ignore. Celebrities took to social media to share their reactions, some sincere, others opportunistic. Comedians cracked jokes about the monarchy being run like a reality show, while actors and singers weighed in with reflections on tradition, duty, and family. The blend of serious commentary and entertainment ensured the story dominated every corner of public life, from parliament chambers to late-night comedy sketches. The frenzy also sparked intense debates about the monarchy's relevance. For critics, the abdication was proof that the institution was outdated, a fragile relic propped up by ceremony rather than substance. For supporters, William's ascension was framed as a rebirth, a chance for the crown to reconnect with modern values and younger generations. Letters to editors poured in, opinion polls spiked, and debates raged across television panels. The monarchy was once again at the center of Britain's cultural divide, revered by some, resented by others, but impossible to ignore. Outcry was not limited to words alone. Demonstrations erupted in London, Edinburgh, and Cardiff, some in celebration, others in protest. Flowers were laid at Buckingham Palace, not for a death, but for a symbolic loss, a gesture of mourning for the king who had stepped away. At the same time, banners welcoming William appeared, declaring him the leader Britain needed. The streets reflected the same paradox as the headlines: grief and hope, anger and relief, all colliding in a single, chaotic outpouring of public emotion. For historians and cultural commentators, the frenzy became a subject of study in itself. They pointed out that the monarchy's power lies as much in perception as in governance, and perception was now volatile. Charles's abdication shattered the illusion of permanence, raising uncomfortable questions about whether kings and queens are as irreplaceable as tradition suggests. The monarchy had always thrived on continuity, on the idea that one sovereign's reign flows seamlessly into another's. But the abruptness of Charles's departure disrupted that narrative, leaving the public unsure whether to feel betrayed or reassured. By the end of the first week, the frenzy had not subsided. Instead, it had evolved. The coverage shifted from the shock of abdication to the scrutiny of William's early days as king. Yet the memory of that first wave of headlines lingered, etched into the collective consciousness. The abdication had not only reshaped the monarchy, it had reminded the world of the monarchy's extraordinary ability to dominate the public imagination, to trigger emotion and controversy in equal measure. The royal protocols that followed King Charles's abdication were as intricate as they were historic. The monarchy is an institution that thrives on ritual, steeped in centuries of tradition designed to project continuity even in times of disruption. Yet abdications are exceedingly rare in British history, and the protocols surrounding them are not often rehearsed. For those inside the palace, this was not simply a matter of ceremony, but of survival, ensuring that the transition of power unfolded with dignity, authority, and a sense of order that reassured both the nation and the world. The first step after the king's decision was the drafting of the official abdication instrument. Legal advisors, constitutional experts, and senior courtiers worked in tandem to create a document that would stand as both a personal renunciation and a binding state act. Every word was chosen with painstaking care. The document had to acknowledge Charles's service, affirm his voluntary decision, and provide the legal basis for William's accession. Once finalized, it was signed in private, with only a handful of witnesses present. The scene was described by insiders as somber and almost surreal. A monarch voluntarily placing his signature on the very paper that stripped him of his title, surrendering centuries of tradition with the stroke of a pen.